Gadada Shiva Sadi Gora Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jaya Om Vishnu Pada Paramahംsa Parivrajikacharya Astottara Shatashi Srimad Charananavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jaya Om Vishnu Pada Paramahamsa Parivrajikacharya Astottara Shatashi Srimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Thakur Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bo. Oh, glorious to the same devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glorious to the same devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glorious to the same devotees, Hare Krishna. Oh, glorious to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Oh, glorious to Shri Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So because we all start with the Lila Amrita and then read Srimad Bhagavatam, I'll just say my prayers first. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Panchakalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Chaitanya Swami Nityananda. Namami Bhakti Chaitanyam Prabhupada Nusevanam Shri Vajradhana Mahatmya Padashakam Kripalavam. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pashtaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityananda. Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nivishesha Shunyavadi Paschachadesh Dharani. Page. Anybody know where we stopped? Okay, I guess it's okay. Let's start on page 42. Lord Chaitanya did not advent himself to liberate only a few men of India. Rather, his main objective was to emancipate all living entities of all countries throughout the entire universe and preach the eternal religion. Lord Chaitanya says in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, in every town, country, and village, my name will be sung. There is no doubt that this unquestionable order will come to pass. Although there is still no pure society of Vaishnavas to be had, yet Lord Chaitanya's prophetic words will in a few days come true, I am sure. Why not? Nothing is absolutely pure in the beginning. From imperfection, purity will come about. Oh, for that day when the fortunate English, French, Russian, German, and American people will take up banners, mridangas, and kartals and raise kirtan through their streets and towns. When will that day come? So that is written by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Yeah. As a prominent magistrate, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was a responsible government officer. He served also as superintendent of the temple of Lord Jagannath and was the father of 10 children. Yet in spite of these responsibilities, he served the cause of Krishna with prodigious energy. After coming home from his office in the evening, taking his meals and going to bed, he would sleep from 8 until midnight and then get up and write until morning. He wrote more than 100 books during his life, many of them in English. One of his important contributions, with the cooperation of Jagannath Das Babaji and Gaurkishore Das Babaji, was to locate the exact birthplace of Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur, about 60 miles north of Calcutta. While working to reform Gaudiya Vaishnavism in India, he prayed to Lord Chaitanya, "Your teachings have been much depreciated. It is not in my power to restore them." And he prayed for a son to help him in his preaching. When on February 6, 1874, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati was born to Bhaktivinoda Thakur in Jagannath Puri, the Vaishnavas considered him the answer to his father's prayers. He was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around his neck and draped across his chest like the sacred thread worn by Brahmanas. His parents gave him the name Bimal Prasad. When Bimal Prasad was 6 months old, the carts of the Jagannath festival stopped at the gate of Bhaktivinoda's residence and for 3 days could not be moved. Bhaktivinoda Thakur's wife brought the infant onto the cart and approached the deity of Lord Jagannath. Spontaneously, the infant extended his arms and touched the feet of Lord Jagannath and was immediately blessed with a garland that fell from the body of the Lord. When Bhaktivinoda Thakur learned that the Lord's garland had fallen onto his son, he realized that this was the son for whom he had prayed. One day, when Bimal Prasad was still a child of no more than 4 years, his father mildly rebuked him for eating a mango not yet duly offered to Lord Krishna. Bimal Prasad, although only a child, considered himself an offender, the Lord, and vowed never to eat mangoes again. This was a vow that he would follow throughout his life. By the time Bhima Prasad was 7 years old, he had memorized the entire Bhagavad Gita and could even explain its verses. His father then began training him in proofreading and printing, in conjunction with the publishing of the Vaishnava magazine, Sajjana Toshani. With his father, he visited many holy places and heard discourses from the learned pundits. As a student, Bhima Prasad preferred to read the books written by his father instead of the school texts. By the time he was 25, he had become well versed in Sanskrit, mathematics, and astronomy, and he had established himself as the author and publisher of many magazine articles and one book, Surya Siddhanta, for which he received the epithet Siddhanta Saraswati in recognition of his erudition. When he was 26, his father guided him to take initiation from a renounced Vaishnava saint, Gaurikishore Das Babaji, who advised him to preach the absolute truth and keep aside all other works. Receiving the blessings of Gaurikishore Das Babaji, Bhima Prasad, now Siddhanta Saraswati, resolved to dedicate his body, mind, and words to the service of Lord Krishna. In 1905, Siddhanta Saraswati took a vow to chant the Hare Krishna mantra 1 billion times. Residing in Mayapur in a grass hut near the birthplace of Lord Chaitanya, he chanted the Hare Krishna mantra day and night. He cooked rice once a day in an earthen pot and ate nothing more. He slept on the ground, and when the rainwater leaked through the grass ceiling, he sat beneath an umbrella chanting. In 1911, while his aging father was lying ill, Siddhanta Saraswati took up a challenge against pseudo-Vaishnavas who claimed that birth in their caste was the prerequisite for preaching Krishna consciousness. The caste-conscious Brahmana community had become incensed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur's presentation of many scriptural proofs that anyone, regardless of birth, could become a Brahmana Vaishnava. These smarta Brahmanas, out to prove the inferiority of the Vaishnavas, arranged a discussion. On behalf of his indisposed father, young Siddhanta Saraswati wrote an essay, The Conclusive Difference Between the Brahmana and the Vaishnava, and submitted it before his father. Despite his poor health, Bhaktivinoda Thakur was elated to hear the arguments that would soundly defeat the challenge of the Smartas. Yeah, so reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 17, Text 36. Nunam janar hitam ishvaranam asma vidaistat gunasaragamaya Nagyayate mohita chitta vartmabis Tebyo namo vira yashaskarepya Nudam jana ihitam ishvaranam asmad vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagyayate mohita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira yashaskarebhya Nunam jana ihitam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagyayate mohita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira yashaskarebhya Nunam jana ihitam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagyayate mohita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira shaskarebhya Nam janai tam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagyayate mohita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira shaskarebhya Nam janai tam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagaite moita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira yashaskarebhya Nam janai tam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagayate moita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira yashaskarebhya Matatis Nam janai tam ishvaranam Asmat vidaistat gunasargamaya Nagayate moita chitta vartmabis Tebhyo namo vira yashaskarebhya Nunam surely Janahai by the people in general Hitam activities Ishvaranam of the controllers Asmat Vidahai like me Tat of the personality of Godhead Guna of the modes of material nature Sarga which brings forth creation Maya by your energy Na never. Gyayate are understood. Mohita, bewildered. Chitta, whose minds. Vartmavihi, way. Tevyaha, unto them. Namaha, obeisances. Vira Yasha Karevyaha, who bring renown to heroes themselves. Translation. My dear Lord, I am also the creation of one of your energies, composed of the three modes of material nature. Consequently, I am bewildered by your activities. Even the activities of your devotees cannot be understood, and what to speak of your pastimes. Thus, everything appears to us to be contradictory and wonderful. Purport. The activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in its various forms and incarnations are always uncommon and wonderful. It is not possible for a tiny human being to estimate the purpose and plans of such activities. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami has said that unless the Lord's activities are accepted as inconceivable, they cannot be explained. The Lord is eternally existing as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Goloka Vrindavan. He has also simultaneously expanded himself in innumerable forms, beginning with Lord Rama, Lord Nrsimha, Lord Varaha, and all the incarnations coming directly from Sankarshan. Sankarshan is the expansion of Baladev, and Baladev is the first manifestation of Krishna. Therefore, all these incarnations are known as Kala. The word Ishvaranam refers to all the personalities of Godhead, as stated in Brahma Samhita 539. Brahmadi Murtishu Kala Niyamena Tishtan. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, it is confirmed that all the incarnations are partial expansions, or Kala, of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. However, Krishna is the original personality, is the original Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should not take the plural number of the word Ishvaranam to mean that there are many Godheads. The fact is that God is one, but He exists eternally and expands Himself in innumerable forms and acts in various ways. Sometimes the common man is bewildered by all this and considers such activities contradictory. But they are not contradictory. There is a great plan behind all the Lord's activities. For our understanding, it is sometimes said that the Lord is situated in the heart of the thief, as well as in the heart of the householder. But the supersoul in the heart of the thief dictates, go and steal things from that particular house. And at the same time, the Lord tells the householder, now be careful of thieves and burglars. These instructions to different persons appear contradictory. Yet we should know that the Supersoul, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has some plan, and we should not consider such activities contradictory. The best course is to surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead wholeheartedly, and being protected by Him, remain peaceful. Thus, in the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 4th canto, 17th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Maharaj Prithu becomes angry at the earth. So this is the final verse in this chapter, which is entitled Maharaj Prithu becomes angry at the earth, and this chapter indicates, it demonstrates to us the personal nature of things, or the very personal nature of existence. This is the earth, as far as I understand, it's Mother Earth speaking. And in this pastime, Maharaj Prithu, an incarnation of the Supreme Lord in the form of a king, great king, becomes angry at Mother Earth for not providing or withholding resources, not providing resources for the living beings on the earth. So we see here that how personal everything is. We tend to think of the earth and even just this whole material nature as being just something impersonal, something just some dead matter, really, that's working automatically. But from the Vedic literatures, we understand that everything's actually personal. The source of everything is a person, and therefore everything coming from that source is personal. So this material nature, it's actually a person. There's a person behind it, a person running it. As well as this planet, there's a person behind it, a person running it. So, but we tend to think of it differently. So, for example, we, in this modern age especially, people think that we can just exploit the earth and exploit the resources of the earth, cause a lot of damage to the material nature, and that it's all okay. There's nothing, because it's like if I offend this chair, there's no harm because it's just a chair. That's how people tend to think of the earth and material nature in general. So it's okay to just drill holes in and remove the oil and do all this sort of thing, and have immoral activities going on, immoral populations of persons, and it's totally fine. There's no reason not to. But actually, we're offending the material nature, and we're offending the planet as well, because they're all persons behind all these things. So we see that in this pastime, how the earth is actually a person interacting with Maharaj Prithu. So let's look at this point about the earth's withholding resources. Srila Prabhupada often would challenge what he referred to as the overpopulation theory. Because some people often speak about overpopulation being a problem in this modern age. There's too many persons on the planet. And Srila Prabhupada challenged that. And there were he challenged it on different levels. The first level that he challenged it on was that, first of all, of course, people are starting to see that now these days as well, but being a liberated soul, Srila Prabhupada could see things so clearly that even on the basic material level, it's basically just mismanaging resources. So Srila Prabhupada pointed out how there's so much land not been used in the correct way. In other words, not been used to cultivate and grow food for the population on the earth. Either it's like just vacant, it's not been used at all, or it's been used for things like industry and so on. One interesting insight, which is people are becoming quite aware of it now, but Srila Prabhupada pointed out back in the 70s, was that they just growing food, lots of food to feed cattle, which they will then slaughter and eat. So um, it's quite a well-known thing today about the effect of on the environment of growing, using land just to grow food for feeding, cattle, and then you could feed so many more people from that, with that food. But so so that is one point Srila Prabhupada made, is that the land has not been properly utilized. So much vacant land, or it's been used for the wrong purpose. You can't eat nuts and bolts. Just all this advancement in machinery and so on is not actually going to benefit people, because if there's not enough food, then what will people do? They can't eat their machines that they're making. So, and then, and just, yeah, I remember actually, just on that point, misuse of land, I remember there's a place just outside of where I'm from, Cape Town in South Africa. There's just a place outside called Stellenbosch. You might probably will be aware of that. Stellenbosch is known for being like wine growing capital of the country. So we would go there sometimes for these university programs, for like yoga society there. And you just drive, and it's acres and acres of land, as far as the eye can see, and beautiful land, and very fertile and so on. But what has it been used for? Just growing grapes, not for eating, but grapes for producing wine. Huge amounts of land. You could feed millions of people from that land. It was used for growing food. So that's just one example that hearing Srila Prabhupada mention these things in his lectures, and then I would just see it right in front of me, and I realized, wow, it's actually true. So much land has been wasted. So Srila Prabhupada said that actually you can feed even much more than the current population with what we have at the moment. To just utilize things properly. And of course, we're aware also of how, due to things being so commercialized, for example, huge amounts of food is thrown into the ocean every year just to keep, to balance like the prices and so on in terms of supply and demand. So mismanagement of resources is one thing that Srila Prabhupada pointed to. The second thing is that, and it's a deeper point, is that actually the earth, as we're reading about in this pastime, is a person. And if you're doing things properly, there's sacrifice going on, and the human form of life has been used for its actual purpose, which is to attain self-realization and God-realization, then the material nature actually reciprocates differently. Yeah, so that's something that people are definitely not aware of today. So because things are personal, there's a person behind material nature. If you're using this human form of life and all the resources for what it's meant for, which is to get out of the cycle of birth and death and go back home, back to Godhead, then naturally the material nature, which is providing all that we need, will provide much more in a much more giving sort of way. Not holding back, in other words, but give as much as, even more than we need. So the earth and material nature is capable of providing so much more than what she currently is, but because of the condition of people and of society and how things are going on, she's also withholding her resources. As we see in this pastime, it's possible for the earth to actually withhold resources. One of the lessons we learned from this pastime. So that is actually going on today, naturally, because of how we're misusing things. It's interesting. The earth sometimes refers to being the heavy burden of unnecessary military strength. So just like these, like demoniac kings, basically, or demoniac leaders, creating these huge armies for the sake of just trying to control and enjoy and exploit this earth. And we think, oh, what's the big deal? Just some armies marching around, because that's what they used to do. They would just march them around. Even like Hitler and these persons, they used to march. They have these marches where they march the armies around. And I remember my spiritual master referring to a nursery rhyme he learned in kindergarten, whereas I forget the exact words, but someone had so many men, and he marched them round and round, and he would march them up the hill and down the hill. Does anybody know the actual words? Anybody able to sing it? Yes, yeah. Yeah. Yes, that's a real classic, that one. So when they're only halfway up, they're neither up nor down. So this is the basic idea, just marching them around back and forth. So this has been going on for in all the ages. The demonic kings would do these things, and they display their power. But the earth points out in some prayers that this is actually like a burden for her, these demoniac forces. And of course we have them today. It's still going on today. Yeah. Okay. So that sort of concludes this pastime, and we move on to the next chapter. Maharaj Prithu milks the earth planet. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada is referring to the expansions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And today is Shiva Ratri, so we'll speak a bit about Lord Shiva now, who is also an expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but in a special category. So before we start speaking on Lord Shiva, we should just remind ourselves that with personalities like this, they are very great personalities, very exalted, beyond our comprehension, actually. And we should not make the mistake of thinking that we can just, like, in a few minutes or even an hour, just like understand them, or even in a whole lifetime, just like really get a grip on them and just, okay, now I've understood Lord Shiva, that's that. Just like I could, of course I don't actually know even how this microphone's working, but I could learn a bit, and I could probably after some time just really understand how this microphone works and say, okay, now I've got it. But it's not, so we have that tendency to think in that way about everything because of our false pride and our false ego. But we shouldn't make that mistake. It's not actually like that with these personalities. We can't really fully understand them. They're very complex, very exalted. So that some level of humility is required. When understanding Krishna himself, of course, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Brahma says that even if one can count all the atoms in the universe, still one can never understand the Supreme Personalities of Godhead, and who can even count all the atoms in the universe? So very far away from our full understanding. So similarly, persons like who are in relation to the Supreme Lord, like Lord Shiva and the Lord's great devotees, we shouldn't feel they're very deep, and we shouldn't feel we can fully just, with our limited mind and intelligence, understand them. But at the same time, the devotees like to glorify the Lord and hear about the Lord's glories, as well as the Lord's expansions and the Lord's devotees. And the devotees take great pleasure in this. It's like swimming in an ocean of nectar for the devotees. Although one doesn't feel one can get to the end of it and like fully understand it, but still one wants to relish it and hear about them as much as possible. So my spiritual master once told me that Srimad Bhagavatam is like an unlimited ocean, unlimitedly deep ocean, and we can never get to the bottom of that ocean. You can just imagine swimming in the ocean with your scuba diving gear trying to get to the bottom, but you can't get to the bottom of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then he said that, but we don't even want to get to the bottom. So what do we want to do? We just want to drown in the ocean. Srimad Bhagavatam. That's something to meditate on. So Lord Shiva will try our best to explain as much as possible from what we've heard from authorities. So Lord Shiva exists originally, we could say, in Vaikuntha, in the spiritual world. There's actually a Vaikuntha planet, and he exists there as a form of the Lord, as an actual form of the Lord, like a pastime incarnation form of the Lord, like the Narayan forms in Vaikuntha. There's a Lord Shiva like that, with his own Vaikuntha planet. And that is described in the Vayu Purana, and Srila Prabhupada refers to it in the Adi Lila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so that's Lord Shiva there. Then there's another form of Lord Shiva called Sada Shiva, who exists in a realm which is between the spiritual and the material worlds. The Lord Shiva we have in the material world is an expansion of him. And this abode of Lord Shiva, or this Lord Shiva, form of Lord Shiva, is referred to in the Brahma Samhita. And I don't have that. I had saved the other verse, not that one, but that's okay. I'll just say the translation. So Lord Brahma explains in the Brahma Samhita that lowest of all is Devi Dham, the material world. Then above that is Mahesh Dham, which is what we're referring to here, Lord Shiva's abode between the material and the spiritual worlds. And then above that is Haridham, which is where the spiritual world, where the Vaikuntha planets are, and ultimately the highest Vaikuntha planet, which is Goloka Vrindavan. So Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati explains in his commentary on Brahma Samhita that Lord Brahma is explaining that because he's actually looking from his viewpoint. Of course, he's in the topmost planet, but he's in the material world and he's looking up. So he's seen Devi Dham, then Mahesh Dham, then Haridham. Just in little detail that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta gives of that. So that Lord Shiva in Mahesh Dham, two in the material and spiritual worlds, he expands into the Lord Shiva in the material world, who is known as Shambhu. That Lord Shiva is because the Supreme Lord and his personal expansions, they do not interact with the material energy directly. So to facilitate that, the Lord expands as Lord Shiva. And Lord Shiva interacts directly with the material energy, who is Durga, and who is therefore Lord Shiva's eternal consort, or wife, you could say. And through Lord Shiva, all the living entities are impregnated into the material nature. So the Lord glances at the material nature. We might be familiar with that. The Lord glances at the material nature and impregnates the material nature through his glance. But that glance and the process of impregnating material nature is done by Lord Shiva, because he is directly interacting with the material nature, which the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not do. He remains eternally situated in Shuddha Sattva, in spiritual existence. So Lord Shiva takes on that service. This Lord Shiva is described in the Brahma Samhita. This one I did save this verse. Shiram yatada divikara vishesha yogat sanjayate nahitata pritag asti hetuho ya shambhutama pitata samupaiti karyat govindamari purusham tamaham bhajami. Just as milk is transformed into curd, when they say curd, they mean it's basically what we understand as yogurt. It's not paneer, in other words, but it means like a kind of yogurt. By the action of acids, yet the effect curd is neither the same as nor different from its cause vis-a-vis milk. So I adore the primeval Lord Govinda, of whom the state of Shambhu is a transformation for the performance of the work of destruction. So how you make yogurt in the Vedic method is you take a pod of raw tamarind, you break it in half and you put it in the warm milk and leave it overnight. And the sourness of the tamarind turns it into yogurt. Of course, then you have the culture, you can just add that yogurt to make more yogurt, but that's how you originally make it. So that's what Lord Brahma is referring to, that the Lord Shiva is like, or Shambhu is like milk that's been transformed into yogurt by adding something sour. So it's like Krishna, but he's not quite exactly the same as Krishna, because there's a sourness added, and that sourness is his association with the material energy. So in one sense, yogurt and milk are the same because they both come from milk. You can't say that without milk you cannot have yogurt. So in a sense, yogurt is like milk. It's not different from milk. But if, say for example, if you're doing some recipe, you're making something and the recipe calls for milk, anyone who cooks will know you can't substitute milk with yogurt and the recipe won't work. So there is a difference. So we already described Lord Shiva's function in interacting with the material nature. And then from that Lord Shiva, he expands into another type of form called the Rudra principle, the Rudra forms. There are quite a few of them, like maybe 11. And there are actually many other forms. As we said, it's a complex subject. There are many forms actually of Lord Shiva. But specifically the Rudra form, and those forms of Lord Shiva are for different functions, or performing different functions within this material universe. But the basic principle is that Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance. That's at least one of his services to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And he expands into the Rudras, as we said. Those Rudra forms they come out at the time of annihilation, when the material universe is annihilated. Of course, it goes in cycles, and those Rudra forms, they destroy the universe, or they aid in the destruction of the universe. So I hope that's kind of clear. I'll try to make it as clear as possible. So Lord Shiva, if we look at his personality, Lord Shiva is actually a great devotee of the Lord. In fact, he's described as the greatest devotee of the Lord. There's a verse in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam which refers to this. Nimna ganam yata ganga, devanam achuto yata, vaishnavanam yata shambhu, purananam idam tata. That's from the 12th canto, chapter 13, text 16. Just as the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, River Ganges, Lord Achyuta, the supreme among deities, that's the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Lord Shambhu or Shiva, the greatest of Vaishnavas, so Srimad Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. So particularly this line, Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, is very famous, and it's, as far as I understand, Lord Chaitanya quotes it, and Srila Prabhupada would often quote it, that Lord Shiva is the greatest of Vaishnavas. So now, I didn't say this verse, but in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I think it's the Adilila, Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains that he's explaining how all the expansions of the Lord, including Lord Shiva, simply want to serve the Lord. And he explains there that Lord Shiva, when the glories of the Lord are chanted, Lord Shiva dances in great ecstatic love, even without his clothes on. In other words, so absorbed in love of Krishna that he's just completely oblivious to everything. He actually uses the word prema, Krishna prema. So he's saying that Lord Shiva is actually situated in pure love of Godhead. So it is very unfortunate that people who worship Lord Shiva do not understand this reality, this fact that what is Lord Shiva actually interested in, and what is Lord Shiva actually experiencing? What is he really into? Because generally because when people worship Lord Shiva, it's this Shambhu form of Lord Shiva, is the one who's worshipped in the material world, or people worship him to fulfill their material desires. And he's known as Ashutosh, he easily fulfills people's material desires. So people being blinded by the material energy and by their material desires, that's all they can think of. They can't think beyond that. And therefore, when they approach Lord Shiva, they simply pray to him for some very mundane material things, just to fulfill their material desires. But they do not know that Lord Shiva has something so much greater that he can give them. And I'll just recite a little pastime to illustrate this principle. At once, someone approached, was it Rupa Goswami with the touchstone? Anybody remember? Sanatana Goswami, that's right, yes, Sanatana Goswami. He had heard that he had a touchstone. Touchstone means it can transform, I think it's metal into gold or something like that. And he approached him and then Sanatana Goswami said, yes, it's just there. You can please take it. It's just there in my, his little rubbish heap there. So the person went and took it, but he was a Brahmin. He had some intelligence at least. So he was walking back and thinking, hang on, if it's such a valuable thing, why did he have it in his rubbish heap? This means he must have something more valuable. So he went back to Sanatana Goswami and asked him, do you have something more valuable? Because you're just keeping this in the rubbish heap. And he said yes, and he initiated him into the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, which is the most valuable thing. And if one is situated nicely in devotional service in chanting Hare Krishna, then one gradually realizes that there's nothing better than that, and even any kind of material wealth or opulence is just like just like some piece of dirt on the ground compared to the devotional service of the Lord and chanting Hare Krishna. So unfortunately, people that do not understand this, Lord Shiva has that highest thing, but they do not understand it, so they just approach him for material desires. And because Lord Shiva is so absorbed in love of Krishna, he just very easily gives people get what they want, because actually they're disturbing his meditation on the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So I'll just tell one very nice pastime of Lord Shiva, and then we'll end. So Lord Shiva, he has an aspect to him of being like an avaduta. And so can I just backtrack once, just for a second, just about Lord Shiva having the highest thing, love of Krishna. And he gives so much opulence to so many people so easily. But what is his personal situation? He lives under a tree, actually. He could have whatever he wants, and the most wonderful mansion, most wonderful residence. But he simply lives under a tree, as you said, because he has the real wealth of chanting the holy name of the Lord and serving the Lord. And that's all he's interested in. So he has a nice pastime. Once Lord Shiva was in an assembly of sages, and he was speaking. He had the Vyasasan, you could say, and he was speaking, and he, of course, what are they speaking on? If Lord Shiva and great sages, what are they interested in? Are they speaking about the news or something like that? No, they're only interested in the absolute truth and ultimately the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the Lord's devotional service. This is what these personalities speak about to each other and what they relish all the time. So Lord Shiva was in one such discussion, and but his avaduta nature, he had his wife Parvati sitting on his lap while he was in the discussion. Which, if you think about it, it's very, at least externally, it seems very unusual. We would find that very unusual. Someone was speaking on the Vyasasan and they had their wife sitting on their lap. So But because the other sages in the audience understood Lord Shiva's exalted position, um, they didn't say anything. They just kept quiet, and they weren't even, they didn't even, they just were absorbed in hearing from him. But there was one very great devotee, very exalted devotee called Chitraketu Maharaj, who this is now not on this planet, it's a different planet. So he's flying in a celestial airplane, and he's seeing this situation, and so he actually laughed and made a comment about it. And it's a very complex pastime. It's very there's many aspects to it, but the basic point is that he wasn't being offensive like another personality called Daksha was at some other point with Lord Shiva. He was actually he said it to glorify Lord Shiva, but also to so that others do not become confused by seeing his behavior. He sort of mentioned something about how strange it is that his wife is sitting on his lap amongst all these great sages and persons in their renounced order. And Lord Shiva didn't say anything. Lord Shiva kept quiet, and just see the exalted nature of these sages. When they heard him speaking, they were looking at Lord Shiva. How is he going to respond? So they saw Lord Shiva didn't say anything, so they didn't say anything. They just kept quiet as well, because they knew we follow the where is it, Mahajana, Gata Yapanta. We follow what the great souls, the most exalted person in that assembly was Lord Shiva. We follow his example. So they also kept quiet. But Lord Shiva's wife, Parvati, took it she took it personally. And she chastised Chitraketu Maharaj and cursed him. But her point was that he said it too many times, that if he had just mentioned something once, she would have let it go. But he said it, I think, like 3 times. So therefore he felt she had to say something. So she cursed Chitraketu Maharaj to become a demon in his next life. Now Chitraketu Maharaj, being just absorbed in love of Krishna, he did not try to counteract it. He was not disturbed in any way, because he's simply interested in the devotional service of the Lord. So he went to Mother Parvati and he just, offered his obeisances and said that, although I haven't committed anything wrong, I fully accept your curse. And he even referred to her as mother. And so that was that. He didn't mind getting cursed, because he saw it as the Lord's arrangement. So then Chitraketu Maharaj goes, and Lord Shiva, Parvati realized she had made a mistake, and she actually blushed and covered her face with a sari. And Lord Shiva said to her, my dear Parvati, you are very beautiful, but I think your beauty has been surpassed by the beauty of the Vaishnavas in this case. And he said, just see the exalted nature of the devotees of the Lord. And then he said that the very famous verse, let's see if I can remember it. Narayana parasarve na kutaschana bibhyati swarga pavarga narakesh vapi tulyartha darshinaha, which translates as the devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana never fear any condition of life. For them, going to the heavenly planets, liberation from material existence, and hell, or going to the hellish planets, are all the same. They see it all equally. And then why is this? Because they are only interested in the devotional service of the Lord. So very, very, just like really, really amazing verse that Lord Shiva spoke. And it demonstrates Lord Shiva's uh, very deep understanding of devotional service and his own position in devotional service to the Lord. So we'll end there. It's just a tiny drop of the glorification of Lord Shiva. There's so many wonderful things we can say about him, and so many wonderful pastimes and qualities we can describe about him, but just given a small drop of the ocean in this humble attempt to glorify him on this Shivaratri day. Anybody have any comments or questions? Yes, Mati. As far as I understand, his milk in terms of the analogy, as far as the Srila Prabhupada, as I said, haven't read the Vayu Purana verses or chapter that describes him, but in the Adilila of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I might have it still on my phone. I can actually read what Srila Prabhupada says. No, I don't have it, but Srila Prabhupada says that is a form of Lord Krishna for pastimes, and he has a Vaikuntha planet. So if he has a Vaikuntha planet, that it means it's the Supreme Personality. It's a form of the Lord, in other words, that Lord Shiva. Yeah. That's what he says in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I'd have to I'd have to have the exact words, but he definitely does say, I haven't done. Maybe you remember as well. He definitely does say, I haven't. But I don't think he says it in the sense of we might say it like in a defensive way. Yeah, I think we tend to. Yeah, it's an interesting question because the interactions of these personalities with each other are so. It's sort of like they are such high platforms of existence. They don't have that kind of envy and stuff that we have, and that's there's so many lower qualities that we have. They're very elevated, so they don't actually have those, or if they do, it's to a very minute degree. And they're also extremely powerful as well. So sometimes it's like hard for us to understand them. And I know, and explain. I'll give an example of what I mean. The pastime which has been just recently passed in this in these classes of the Daksha sacrifice and Daksha offending Lord Shiva, and then all the sort of effects of all that, all the cursing and counter cursing that was going on, and person's been killed and all sorts of things, and then brought back to life, and then Parvat Sati, at the time she was known, Sati, Lord Shiva's wife, and that at that time committing suicide. It's not like what would go on today in this, you know, if that sort of thing had to happen right now, it would be a lot different actually. It may look the same, but it's actually a lot different. And the acharyas explain, what I'm referring to is the acharyas explain in the purpose to those pastimes, is that these are such extremely powerful persons. They're actually just like playing with their powers. It's sort of like it's not even that serious to them, you know. Killing, bringing persons back to life. It's all just sort of like they have so much power. They just want to actually use it a bit. That's actually what they say. They actually want to use their power a bit, just display their power a bit. So when I heard that commentary, I understood that. I began to understand that these persons, because they're so powerful and they're so exalted, it's actually hard for us to understand them, like what they're doing and in their interactions. And the tendency is to look at their interactions from the viewpoint of our interactions. That we interact with people like this because we feel like that and because we want to do that. But their interactions are actually on a different level to ours. That's the basic point, yeah. They're on a different level to ours. They have much more power, they have much more exalted qualities, their consciousness is much more elevated. So that's why we always treat these pastimes with a little caution. Yeah. Like even Parvati's cursing, Chittiketu, we treat it all with caution and with respect because it's sort of a little bit beyond us actually, and they're very exalted persons. But yeah, the basic point is that he was happy to accept the curse. He had no problem, but he did point out that he hadn't done anything wrong. But I think he just knew that he hadn't done anything wrong because he knew that in his heart there was no envy of Lord Shiva. I would see it here. Yeah. Does anybody have anything they'd like to add to that question, to that answer, or corrections or additions, or to help us understand it a bit better? Any insights? Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Vasily? Yeah. Yeah. So sometimes Srila Prabhupada does, it might be in that pastime, but I know definitely in the pastime of the Daksha sacrifice, when Parvati is becoming agitated and wants to go to the sacrificial arena, Srila Prabhupada refers to the woman's nature, wanting to dress up and see her relatives and that sort of thing. So Srila Prabhupada does refer to that a bit in these pastimes, and the point is that because we can learn from that. In other words, if one is in a female body, then one can learn what the weaknesses of the female body are from that. Just like if one's in a male's body, one can learn of the weaknesses of the male's body by seeing certain things. So it's good to know, because as devotees we know we're not the body, and we don't take that all so seriously in a personal way. So we just see, okay, we have this body. What are the weaknesses I need to know about so that I can progress nicely in my Krishna consciousness? So as in a female body, you can look at it, you can learn from it in that sense, from Srila Prabhupada's purports. But then again, as I said, this is the material energy personified actually. Everything around us, we're all 100% under the control of that Parvati. 100%. So it's not, these aren't ordinary persons. They're very powerful. But in terms of your question of what difference you see in Lord Shiva and Lord Parvati's reaction to Chitraketu, Lord Shiva, he reacted as he should have, but you could also kind of say she was reacting as she was defending Lord Shiva, That was her point, that he didn't just say it once, he said it, he kept saying it, kept making comments, and it went too far, and therefore she felt the need to step in. So again, there's so many aspects to these pastimes. There's what we can learn from the female nature, but she's so exalted, and she also was defending the great personality, Lord Shiva. So many things going on at once in these very deep pastimes. Is that okay? Yeah. Yeah. Is it a question? um, yeah. So yeah, we have to be careful not. So the question is, how do we defend another devotee if one devotee is blaspheming them, for example, or being critical, without offending that actual devotee who's been critical? Yeah. Recently, such questions out as because I'm struggling to answer it, I'll refer to what I've heard from greater personalities. I just heard recently uh, a very recent class given by His Holiness Devamrita Swami. Someone asked the question about if a devotee has done something wrong, how do we deal with them? So Maharaj was saying that we can, if a devotee has gone off the rails or committed, I know it's not exactly the same, has done a mistake, we have to be careful in correcting them because we can offend a devotee even though they've committed offenses. They're still offendable, if that makes sense. The reason being because they have done a lot of devotional service in the past. So if someone's done any service to Krishna at all, actually, then they are dear to Krishna. So we can still offend them, even if now they've gone off the rails or done something wrong or something. But because of that past service, they're dear to Lord Krishna, and we can offend them. So the point is just to be careful. That was what he said. Just have to be careful that in going about the correction, we don't end up offending that person themselves because they are offendable. They are dear to Krishna. So if the devotee is criticizing another devotee, that devotee saying the criticism is dear to Krishna, but because of the service they've done, but we can't just go with that criticism. We have to it depends also on the situation. If they're junior to us, it's equal, or if they're senior. If they're senior, we have to try to just get away because we don't really have much scope to correct them. We remain respectful, but keep a distance. Yeah. if they're equals and there's enough relationship there, we can speak to them about it and try to correct them and convince them in a very nice way. And the same goes for if they're junior to us. Again, there kind of has to, even there has to be like some sort of relationship or something before you can correct them. Just because they're junior doesn't mean you can just tell them off because it doesn't always work. If we feel it can work, we can try to correct them, but otherwise we may have to go to someone who has a good relationship with them. But I think, with devotees, it's good to try to explain to them and convince them, even philosophically, why it's not good, or glorifies, mention some good qualities of that devotee that they criticize. Yeah. Is that okay? Any other questions or comments? Then on 9 o'clock, Grancha Chun Bhagavatam Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.